Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, a Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast. Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, everybody. This is interrupting your regularly scheduled program for a special report here. Obviously, today was the release of the UAP task force meetings. It was the public meetings, the declassified meetings, and we're going to put together a little reaction video for you based off of what came out today.
Yeah, we're going to kind of watch this and comment over it. Basically, there were some key notes and some key points to this whole thing as it went down. You can go and watch it. There'll be a link here. We'll have it up for you guys to go watch the whole thing if you want. We're just going to kind of skip through it here and there, and
we're covering the good stuff.
The good stuff, yeah, because there really is some good stuff here, guys. It wasn't all just a whitewash like some people had thought it was going to be, and I believe that we're going to see a lot more coming very soon from this. So I'm just going to hit play. You guys tell me, can you? He's a little low right here, so. They adjust the volume on their own. It's out of our control.
Congress rewrote the charter for that
so
now called the Airborne Object Identification.
This is going to be basically the first public hearing in like 50 years, basically, is what you're looking at here. This is history,
this is
guys.
Historic.
This is very historic. So big day for ufology, a great day for ufology.
Unidentified aerial phenomena are
unidentified aerial phenomena, of course, is the new word for UFOs.
It's almost become a new catch-all too.
It really has.
It's covering the ships, objects,
but they are real.
Balls of light.
They need to be investigated,
yes.
And many threats they pose need to be mitigated.
There he is.
Undersecretary Moultrie, Mr. Bray.
So. Dave is with us, by the way, for those who don't know. Dave Roberts has joined us for this discussion. Dave, do you want to, I'm going to hit pause here and you want to kind of tell us who the main players are here, what we're going to be seeing?
Of course, on here we have the Undersecretary, actually the Deputy Secretary, Ronald Moultrie, if I'm saying that right.
Moultrie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have, we have Deputy Secretary Ronald Moultrie and Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. Of course, Undersecretary Ronald Moultrie, he's also with, he's actually with the Department of Defense and stuff for their side of it. And then Scott Bray, of course, being the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence.
And he was in charge of the UAP task force, as I understand.
And of course, what I just find interesting about this, and as we go through this, we'll see it's just like, you would think they would have more agencies involved than what we're really seeing in these meetings. Because I said this before, we were talking earlier. It's like you don't hear about them involving the Air Force and some other agencies that have been in this history for years, and we'll see more points in that later on.
We'll definitely see more points in that later. This point was basically just for these guys to justify this new reimagined ATIP, pretty much, right, Joe? I mean, that's kind of what this AIMSOG.
They rebranded ATIP essentially and call it AIMSOG, which is kind of a mouthful. And that is AIMSOG. The government loves its acronyms, so they call this one AIMSOG. Essentially, it's rebranding of ATIP, which was essentially a rebranding of another government program that was a rebranding of another government program that was a rebranding of Blue Book.
No, it's true. The Airborne Object Identification Management Synchronization Group is the new one. And boy, that rolls right off your tongue. So let's go ahead and start playing this thing and get to some of the more interesting things.
Line for implementation is fast approaching, but the group does not even have a named director.
Now, as he just
We
said,
need
they
to
don't even have a
know,
named
sirs,
director.
the status
So
of
the
the
best part,
organization and the obstacle
like,
to
I
getting
was
it up
former
and running.
military. Every
Second-
operation that we ever did, every task force that ever existed, had a director before it was ever appointed.
Okay,
Like-
that's yeah.
It's
Deflect.
just crazy.
You have to convince the audience today, and most
You're
especially
the audience.
our military and civilian aviators, the culture has changed. That those who report UAPs will be treated as witnesses, not as kooks. Thirdly, you need to show us,
And,
Congress,
and now that's really
the
important
American
too,
public
because now I never
who's
saw anything weird when I was in the Air Force while we were in flight.
Mhm.
But like, I can't tell you how many times I heard, if you see something, don't say anything.
Yeah.
Like, don't report it. You get grounded.
What's your career?
And what he just did, like, inadvertently, he just validated those claims that have been made by all these prior service members for the last 3 or 4 decades, about not asking or not telling what you've been seeing. Because in years past, if you reported one of these objects, it turns into a mountain of paperwork and psych evaluations. And if you remember going back and watching some of the now verified leaked government videos, near the end of them, they say, sir, would you like to make an official report on any of this? No, I don't have anything I want to report. And then it said they go back and they ask the other officer, sir, is there anything that you would like to report? No, nothing to report here.
Yeah,
Nothing for
they
official
addressed that actually in Close Encounters. That was one of the key scenes that they addressed, and it was a recreation. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Imaginations you have captured. You are willing to follow the facts where they lead.
Now, that is a key part right there. And this is something that you say all the time, Joe. And it's good to hear these guys actually having to address this, isn't it? I mean, really.
It really is. And
we fear
it's one of those things where
the DOD is focused.
I'd like to take credit for coming up with that term, but it's something that was ingrained in me when I was in the military. So it's nice to be seeing these, I guess, crossovers, at least as far as the investigation process is going to be concerned.
It's more on emphasizing what it can explain, not investigating what it can't.
Now, that's important. Let's listen to exactly what he just said right there.
Imaginations you have captured. You are willing to follow the facts where they lead. We fear sometimes that the DOD is focused more on emphasizing what it can explain, not investigating what it can't. I'm looking for you to assure us today that all conclusions are on the table. One final note, we are mindful today that AIMSOG is not starting from scratch. This is the third version of this task force in DOD, and civil society groups like the Mutual UFO Network, Mr. Corbell and others have been collecting data on this issue for years. I hope you'll explain how you can leverage the knowledge and experience of our prior work on this matter to move the AIMSOG along. The last time Congress had a hearing on UAPs was half a century ago. I hope that it does not take 50 more years for Congress to hold another, because transparency is desperately needed.
Can I just say I love this guy?
Crawford,
Yeah, right?
he'd like to make.
Seriously, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Moultrie, Mr. Bray, thank you for coming here today. We appreciate it. To begin the open dialogue between Congress and the executive branch on this.
Let's go on up to 447. I'm going to go about 440 or so. We'll go here.
Of phenomena that seem to perform in ways that could pose a threat to safe flight operations, or that could be signs of a foreign adversary's attempt to develop a strategic technological surprise against the United States. It's also essential that our pilots and others feel they can report UAPs they observe without any stigma for doing so. This is the open, unclassified portion of our hearing. We'll have a closed, classified part later. It's important for the public to know that the classification of information exists to protect national security, not to try to hide the truth. When we're trying to determine if any UAPs are new
We would
technologies
never
being
hide the
developed by
truth,
foreign
guys.
governments, we are inevitably going to
course.
run into classified information about what
Well,
new
see,
systems and
it's
technologies
quite a
we
bit of
do know
deflection
are in the works
throughout
here
this
or
year.
abroad. But
Yeah.
where information does not risk national security, it should be shared with our allies and the public when feasible. I hope that we can have your assurance to this end today. It's my hope that the intelligence community will continue to try to determine the nature of UAPs we've observed and will keep Congress fully apprised of all developments. I look forward to this hearing and continued dialogue and oversight with the intelligence community on this topic. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and now I'll turn to our distinguished chairman, Adam Schiff, for any comments he wishes to make.
Thank you, Chairman Carson, for holding this open hearing on unidentified aerial phenomenon and for your leadership on this issue. Holding a portion of our discussion today in open session is critical to the cause of
It's hard to get a
transparency
read
and
on
openness,
him here because you can see
which was
that smile
Congress's
on his
intent in
face.
authorizing and funding
Yeah.
this new task force.
Yeah, I agree.
The larger effort that is being undertaken to study and characterize UAP reports is an important step towards understanding these phenomena, what we know and don't know. And I look forward to hearing more during both the open session and the closed setting about how DOD and the IC are undertaking that task. UAP reports have been around for decades, and yet we haven't had an orderly way for them to be reported without stigma and to be investigated. That needs to change. UAP reports need to be understood as a national security matter.
The third
And
time.
that message needs
Right there. You heard that. A national security matter. What had they said for countless decades? UFOs represent no threat to national security.
Blue Book ended on that note. Sign ended on that note.
No threat.
No threat.
No
Yeah.
threat.
Last I think maybe 3 years we've been here. It's been picking up steam more and more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And with that, let us go up to the 9-minute mark.
Analysis and reporting of UAP-related data. What are UAP? Put simply, UAP are airborne objects that, when encountered, cannot be immediately identified. However, it is the department's contention that by combining appropriately structured, collected data with rigorous scientific analysis, any object that we encounter can likely be isolated, characterized, identified, and if necessary, mitigated. We know that our service members have encountered unidentified aerial phenomena, and because UAPs pose potential flight safety and general security risk, we are committed.
They pose a, what did he just say, Joe? What was that? I just thought I heard this man say.
That they could pose a security risk.
Okay. I thought that's what I
Yeah.
heard. Let's continue.
To a focused effort to determine their origins. Our effort will include the thorough examination of adversarial platforms and potential breakthrough technologies, U.S. government or commercial platforms, allied or partner systems, and other natural phenomena.
This guy gives me like real Quinn vibes.
We also understand that there has been a cultural stigma surrounding UAP. Our goal is to eliminate the stigma
the way he
by
approaches
fully
all this,
incorporating
especially in
our
the
operators
first
and
little
mission
days, like
personnel into
how we're
a
going to try
standardized data
to
gathering process.
explain more.
We believe
Yeah.
that making
unexplained.
UAP reporting
Like it's
mission
like Michael
imperative
Quinn born
will
into
be
a new
instrumental
body.
to the effort's success.
Like this is the role you're going
The
to be.
Defense Intelligence and Security Enterprise provides real-time
I
support
mean,
to our warfighters
they
and mission
want
personnel
to-
across all domains. To
pull
optimize
back
the
this
department's
stigma,
UAP work,
but
we are
they
establishing
created
an
this
office
stigma.
within
Yeah.
the Office of the Secretary of Defense.
The most,
And he said like they want to pull the stigma back to
facilitate the
reporting, but at the
identification
same
of
time, like
previously unknown or unidentified airborne
yeah. At the same time, he wants to explain everything away. This is priceless.
objects
it's
in a
Project
methodical,
Blue Book 2.0
logical,
for
and
him.
standardized manner.
It really is.
These goals will ensure that
But it
we
doesn't
are
stay that
working
way.
closely with operational personnel
You know,
on training and reporting
They
requirements,
got real open for a while.
developing data and
Now
intelligence
like they're getting
requirements,
more closed again.
standardizing and integrating
That's
processes
exactly
and
what I said
procedures for
earlier.
collection, operational surveillance, analysis, and
What's
I
reporting.
was talking to Ron on the
Leveraging
phone,
our
that they're
research and
opening up,
development
that they're
capabilities
going to
to
lock her back
improve
down again real
detection,
fast.
characterization,
I think it's
and
more like a pressure
identification of UAPs, developing mitigating solutions and procedures, and identifying strategy and policy solutions. This
Like,
effort will maximize
okay,
collaboration
pause this
and
real
build.
quick. this is the second time we've heard this part at this point. They talk about mitigating. For anybody who's not familiar with, you might know what the word mitigate means, but from a military standpoint, mitigation is like the extreme.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we eliminate this happening from happening? Is not how do we avoid it? How do we how do we stop it from happening?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, that kind of falls into that whole, what's that word? I'm thinking again.
National security.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that, UFOs don't represent a threat to. You're correct, Dave.
Upon already existing relationships with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
Let's go up to
FAA,
about
or unidentified aircraft or objects in military-controlled training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace.
Now here we see Bray.
Reports of sightings are frequent and continuing. We attribute this increase in reporting to a number of factors, including our work to destigmatize reporting, an increase in the number of new systems such as quadcopters and unmanned aerial systems that are in our airspace, identification
And
of what we
he
can
had
classify
direct
as
communication with the
mylar
UAP
balloons
task
and other
force.
types of air
So
trash,
he is speaking
and improvements in the
for
capabilities
UAP
of
task
our
force.
various sensors to detect things in
And
our
he's the one
airspace.
actually.
Almost 2 years ago, in August of 2020, Deputy Secretary of Defense Nordquist directed.
What's that, Dave?
He's the one that tends to deflect a little more throughout this hearing as well.
Yeah.
He's also the one, if you watch, Moultrie looks at him a lot to get approval as to what he's going to be saying. So to pay careful attention to that.
Well,
There'll be some key parts of that.
You can tell that that this guy spent some time in his dress blues. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
just because he's in civvies right now doesn't mean that he's not spent a lot of time with that whole intelligence aspect of things. And he is very, very good about how he deflects some of these questions and uses some lingual gymnastics to get around some of the questions.
Yeah, he does a great job.
What's so interesting is
of the unidentified aerial phenomena task force.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, so what's interesting is Moultrie, he during the whole this whole entire hearing, which you'll see, is he exudes confidence, but yet he seems like there's like this nervous tick to him here and there. And then Bray seems confident throughout the entire thing, but there are some stumbling moments he has.
Very, very few, but yes, you're absolutely right.
Within the Department of the Navy. The UAP task force was built on the foundation of the Navy's initial efforts to respond to the reports from our aviators on unidentified objects observed in our training ranges. The basic issues then and now are twofold. First, incursions in our training ranges by unidentified objects represent serious hazards to safety of flight. In every aspect of naval aviation, safety of our air crews is paramount.
Now,
Second,
pause.
Intrusions.
Okay. Literally, last year, just for anybody who may have listened or didn't listen, Ron and I got the privilege to appear on a fairly large UFO podcast.
I think that was the year before, actually.
It was maybe because I remember real little. So so it might have been for 2020.
Yeah.
So there was actually somebody who was they were a MUFON investigator, like top dog MUFON investigator. Never had a day of service, military service in his life, mind you. But tried to argue me on that point right there on this massive broadcast. And it's nice hearing it come to fruition here 2 years later. Just basically because I knew basic safety protocol for flight training and whatnot, but it doesn't take a genius to put those two things together.
But at the time, Joe, people were using that as a basic whitewash debunking technique, right? I mean,
yeah. But this is like these are like
understand it.
These are top level investigators in the country who had no clue how real world operation took place.
And what he's alluding to right here too, I believe, is like he talks about going over these bases, like the UFOs or UAPs that were spotted over the nuclear sites, shutting those sites down.
That's coming up.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
yeah. Oh yeah.
What he's
Now,
saying,
what he's talking about right now is like aerospace accidents, like collisions.
yeah,
Because a lot, when we're performing these training sessions, we're not putting kid gloves on. The only thing that's kid gloves is we're not going out fully loaded. We're not armed to the teeth. They're still performing these maneuvers in real world speeds. If one of these UAPs show up in that area, it's not a commercial or joint service vehicle. It's not going to be.
I think it's important what you just said. It's not a joint service vehicle, because that's what the actual allegation was on that particular podcast that we were on.
It was.
These were simply unknowns that were, from other armed services, correct?
Right. That was their argument. And I was telling them, no, absolutely not. Anytime there is any kind of joint service training, it is full disclosure, because we don't want anybody to accidentally die on our soil during training, because those people, one, it's a human life. Two, there are millions and millions of dollars in training that is
and
put
equipment
behind each one of those individuals. Plus, there's billions of dollars in maintenance and manufacturing of those aircraft. They're not going to just say, oh, let's go surprise them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But you hear him right there just address that and just totally blow it out of the water. And for that, sir, I salute you.
By unknown aircraft or objects pose potential threats to the security of our operations. Our aviators train as they would fight. So any intrusions that may compromise the security of our operations by revealing our capabilities, our tactics, techniques, or procedures are of great concern to the Navy and the Department of Defense. From the very beginning, we took these reports very seriously. We instituted a data-driven approach to the investigations where we could collect as much data as possible and use all available resources to analyze and make informed decisions on the best ways to address our problems.
I don't think you did.
Not from the beginning.
Was to transition UAP efforts from an anecdotal or narrative-based approach to a rigorous science and technology engineering-focused study. This data-driven approach requires input from a wide variety of sources. In the early stages, the task force worked to standardize the reporting mechanisms and processes to make it as easy as possible for personnel to report any engagement, so that we were getting that wide range of reporting that we needed. We also spent considerable efforts engaging directly with our naval aviators and building relationships to help destigmatize the act of reporting sightings or encounters. And we worked with naval aviation leadership to provide additional equipment to record any encounter. Navy and Air Force crews now have step-by-step procedures for reporting on a UAP on their knee board in the cockpit and in their post-flight debrief procedures. The direct result of those efforts has been
it's interesting that that's actually
with
been
increased
now
opportunities to focus
that's
on,
like standard
on any objects.
Yeah, it is.
The message is now clear.
That's a big deal.
If you see
it's
something,
huge.
you need to report it.
See?
And the message has been received. In fact, recently, I received a call from a senior naval aviator with over 2,000 flight hours. He called me personally from the flight line after landing to talk about an encounter that he had just experienced.
Okay, pause that real quick.
Those were just the
for anybody who's listening to this right now and you heard called from the flight line, that means he had A, not exited the aircraft yet, or B, literally just exited and was standing on the outside of the aircraft. Right. So the flight line is a restricted zone. The only time you're allowed to be out there is when you're performing need to maintenance or when you're actually going out to board the aircraft. So he was just flight line is part of the runway too. So I mean, he is straight off the landing strip and made that phone call.
That is an interesting point, Joe, because what would warrant one to call such a person as this?
Called them directly on the fly. Like I get off the aircraft, I have to call not my superior, because like standard chain of command would be that you would tell your superior officer then they would file the report to their superior officer, and then it would just kind of go up the chain. This guy, top of the ladder, okay? He went and just jumped the entire chain of command to make this report.
Why would you do
Pretty
that,
significant.
Joe? Why would you do that? Do you have any speculation as to why this would happen, or how that would happen? Because there are chains of command that have to be followed, right? I mean, that's
generally. I mean, normally you get slapped on the hand pretty hard if you go outside of your chain of command, and then it trickles, because it does trickle back down. You know, if you go, when you shoot it straight to the moon, it comes right back down, and everybody finds out that you went above and over your chain of command.
Gotcha.
So, unless it is something that poses, like, say, an immediate threat, and that they need to, it is on a direct need to know basis. I need to let them know now. For example, if say you are in flight and you see an enemy aircraft in your airspace, that is like an immediate, you skip the chain of command, you're hitting the red button, and you're getting the direct phone call to the commander and saying, hey, boss, here we go.
And you know, this could be hearsay what I'm going to say here, but you know, we don't know what happened leading up to it. So there could have been several pilots up there flying. And this one pilot that landed, or he said, or we were still in the cockpit. He might have just said, "Well, I'll take it from here." From one of his pilots he had experience, and he had experience and saw it, and probably called it in the tower. Got permission to go, okay, we need to take this one up here, and maybe got permission to go above the chain of command, maybe.
Could have been following a mission guideline
normally,
too, right?
if it's something that's extreme, like, nobody's going to say anything. They're like, hey, good job, you did the right thing. But this being a UAP reporting scenario, like he mentioned earlier, it's part of the debrief. So you would think, unless this is like a really urgent something kind of sighting, that it would have just been part of the debrief. Oh yeah, hey, we saw blah 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 blah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing, guys. We're just kind of going through this thing and picking it apart, and kind of reading between the lines on a lot of this stuff, because there's really a lot of stuff here. So the next part that he talks about, I find particularly interesting because it goes into something later.
Has been received. In fact, recently I received a call from a senior naval aviator with over 2,000 flight hours. He called me personally and other U.S. government agencies and departments. We forged partnerships with the Research Development and Acquisition.
Right there.
Naval aviator with over 2,000 flight hours. He called me personally from the flight line after landing to talk about an encounter that he had just experienced.
Right here.
Those were just the initial steps. We also made a concerted effort to assemble subject matter experts from across the Department of Defense and the intelligence community and other U.S. government agencies and departments. We forged partnerships with the research, development, and acquisition communities, with industry partners, and with academic research labs, and we brought many allies and international partners into our discussions on UAP.
Now, let's think about this. We're going to hear some terminology thrown about here in a little bit. It's going to be things like official, capacity, things like that. What happens when we have research partners, guys?
Well, particularly in this instance, what he just said was the research allies, the R&D acquisitions, Joint Service Task Force. Essentially, he just said, okay, this is all classified.
That's exactly what he said.
Everything you have, put it on the table. Let us see it. We're not telling anybody. We just need to know if this is yours.
Yeah, and some of their partners, I think we've also found out a little bit, may be subcontracted, and those subcontracted works can also be omitted from any further inquiry.
Right, because it's third party.
Right, exactly.
Just like Bigelow Aerospace.
Bingo.
Additionally, subject matter experts from a wide variety of fields, including physics, optics, metallurgy, meteorology, just to name a few, have been brought in to expand our understanding in areas where we may not have organic expertise.
So what he's talking about is special metals technicians, metallurgists, which was actually what my job was in the Air Force. And he's saying that they're now directly working with those guys. That's really interesting. That is really, really, really interesting. It's cool to hear that, though. Really interesting, though.
What's that
Yeah.
make you go?
No, it's interesting to me because he's saying something here that he's going to roll back later.
Yeah, well, Joe, what's that make you really think that when he talks about the metallurgy and some of that?
Well, it goes back to the Stars Academy. He's mentioned the research, development, and acquisition group.
Mm-hmm.
That's who actually has the meta materials that were acquired by the U.S. government. And those research and development groups normally are third-party contracts. So they're shielded. They're under another bubble that you can't get a FOIA out on. But he's working with metallurgy groups, being Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force being the most advanced of those four. It's really interesting because now that kind of pries the door open for anybody who's in the know and knows kind of like how that stuff works. He just basically said that we have some kind of weird metals.
Yeah,
and they're trying to get an understanding of how they work and what they operate like. Or alternatively, that's the really speculative version. Or alternatively, they're wanting to have a better understanding of the known materials that we're using currently.
Yeah.
That are classified, because there are several metals that are 100% classified. You cannot know unless you work on them specifically.
Sure.
Nobody has clearance to fool with them. Like, you're not going to get this compartmentalized breakdown within anything else except for your special materials group.
Yep, absolutely.
Special materials
understand that.
very compartmentalized.
Very much understand that.
And reportedly, like even with Bigelow, what we know about them, the man himself that owned Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
I mean, reportedly, a lot of folks know this. Supposedly, he had found some special metals that have since been classified, and that's a known fact, I believe.
It is. Those are actually in one of those R&D acquisition groups, and the use of some of those metals allegedly has been moved into functional testing or functionality testing, rather, seeing as how they could work in modern hardware. Now it's just really cool hearing them talk about that, because that means that there's some stuff that they're privy to that they know they're privy to, and they're wanting to try to figure out more. Like, for instance, that one aircraft that we witnessed fly over the Mothman Festival.
Mothman Festival that year. The Delta shaped. Yeah.
That is a off the books aircraft.
100%. I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah. I mean, I'd seen blueprints and stuff for it back in the day, but like that's as far as it went.
I've still never seen a plane that looked like it, Joe. And I think that's remarkable, considering that was what, 2016, 2017, something like that.
Well, that was the
I don't remember.
2018. It was our
2018. Yeah, that's right.
Second or third year doing that one, but
it was 2018.
But yeah, that was a trip. But yeah, that aircraft is an off the books aircraft, and that kind of thing is what they're going to be saying that they're working with and figuring out, talking to metallurgists on how these materials work, because different metals, I mean, even aluminum behaves differently at 20,000-30,000 feet than it does on the tarmac.
Sure, absolutely. So they got to know this stuff.
Yeah, they've got to know this.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they're working with alien metals, guys. It means that they're trying to understand how some of these things may actually react in the upper atmosphere under certain stresses.
It's just interesting that they're bringing in like my old shop into it, which is just cool. Like, because I used to be one of those guys. Hearing that, I'm like kind of geeking out a little bit.
Carry on.
On deck approach to better understand this phenomena. So what have we learned so far? Any given observation may be fleeting or longer. It may be recorded.
I think we knew that, right?
Yeah.
Did we know that? Let's see how much stuff that we know that these guys came up with. That one we've got.
Or not. It may be observable by one or multiple assets.
We got that one.
Got that
In
one?
short, there's rarely an easy answer. For example, let me share with
one?
you the first video that we have here today.
Okay, I'm just going to skip
which
this
shows
because we don't get to
observation
see the
in real
video.
time.
Yeah, the video is
find it.
actually classified.
We can find some of the stuff that they're talking about. There's one where they do show later on, and it's the
Very
little
much.
sphere that flies
That's,
past
in many
the
cases,
plane.
that's all the report may include.
And
in many
they can't
other
even
cases,
really stop it.
we
It's
have
moving so fast,
far
by the
less.
way.
Well,
Just-
this is the triangle witness he's talking about.
As we detailed in
Not
both
yet.
the
He's
unclassified
getting
and
ready to go to
classified
that.
versions of the preliminary assessment released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence last June, this often limited amount of high-quality data and reporting hampers our ability to draw firm conclusions about the nature or intent of UAP. As detailed in the ODNI report,
Okay.
if and when individual UAP incidents are resolved,
Here,
they likely fall into one of
Here we
5
go.
potential explanatory categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, U.S. government or U.S. industry developmental programs, foreign adversary systems, or a other bin that allows for a holding bin of difficult cases and for the possibility of surprise and potential scientific discovery.
now let's talk about that other bin for just a second, because
Yeah.
the other ones I understand perfectly well, but is it just me, or is that just a fancy way of saying alien technology
Or
or unexplained technology, I should say?
unexplained is probably better. I wouldn't say that they
Extra
would
dimensional.
outright. Giorgio is not the one who made the list.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would probably mean just unexplained materials, unexplained phenomena or aircraft.
I would be with you on that, right up to the difficult cases and so forth, and the possibility of surprise and potential scientific discovery.
Yeah.
That's something. That's something.
You're right.
I don't know what, but that's something. So I found that interesting. It was finally nice to get an actual clear definition of the murky other bin. We've heard about it.
The other bin had been teased 2 years ago,
Yeah, it was teased in
and we
the
had no idea what was going to
ODNI release last year. So yeah. So now we know what the other bin actually is and what it contains. And yeah, it kind of, could be read into it as,
exactly what everybody thought.
Yep, exactly. Maybe aliens. Who knows?
Maybe.
Recorded what appears to be triangles, sun flashing.
Now here we go.
Recorded several years ago off the coast of the United States. This was recorded while the U.S. Navy ship observed a number of small unmanned aerial systems in the area. And importantly, the video was taken through night vision goggles with a single lens reflex camera. These remained unresolved for several years.
Okay, they're watching the video and
videos.
Yeah, so they're saying that these, and what's interesting here is we're talking about 2 incidents. By the way, he's talking about 2 separate incidents. It's not just the one that Corbell had released, and everybody was saying, oh yeah, that's just lens bokeh on helicopters or whatever. He's talking about another one, and it's in a geographical different location, but they're convinced that this is exactly what this was. This was just a lens artifact is all this was from drones. And we'll hear him explain that.
Goggles and an SLR camera recorded this image.
Oh.
But this time,
Yeah.
other U.S. Navy assets also observed unmanned aerial systems nearby. And we're now reasonably confident that these triangles correlate to unmanned aerial systems in the area. The triangular appearance is a result of light passing through the night vision goggles and then being recorded by an SLR camera. I don't mean to suggest that everything that we observe is identifiable, but this is a great example of how it takes considerable effort to understand what we're seeing in the examples that we are able to collect. In this example, we accumulated sufficient data from 2 similar encounters from 2 different time periods in 2 different geographic areas to help us draw.
Carson don't look convinced.
That's not always the case.
Does he?
We
Not at all.
recognize that that can be unsatisfying or insufficient in the eyes of many. This is a popular topic in our nation, with various theories as to what these objects may be and where they originate. By nature, we are all curious and we seek to understand the unknown. And as a lifelong intelligence professional, I'm impatient. I want immediate explanations for this as much as anyone else. However, understanding can take significant time and effort.
Can
Why
you
we've
read
endeavored to
Carson's
concentrate on this
expression for
data-driven
those
process to derive
at home,
fact-based
Joe?
results. And given the nature
Yeah,
of our
he ain't
business,
buying it.
national defense, we've had to sometimes be less forthcoming with information from open forums than
he's
may
not
be
liking
appropriate.
what he's hearing. He's not
If UAPs
he's not
do
believing what
indeed
he's being
represent a
told
potential
here,
threat to our security, then
based
the
off what I
capabilities,
can gather.
systems, processes, and
uh,
sources we use to observe, record, study, or analyze these phenomena
At
need to be
least he's not
classified at
satisfied with
appropriate
the
levels.
answer being given.
No.
We do not want
think so.
potential adversaries to know exactly what we're able to see or understand, or how we come to the conclusions we make. Therefore, public disclosures must be carefully considered on a case-by-case basis. So what's next? We're concentrating on a seamless transition to the new organization. And future analysis of complicated issues of UAP issues will greatly benefit from the infrastructure, the process, and the procedures that we've developed to date. I'm confident that the task force, under Navy leadership, has forged a path forward that will allow us to anchor assessments in science and engineering by anecdotal evidence. We remain committed to that goal, as I know the USDI organization does as well. So thank you very much for your interest and continuing support for the UAP Task Force. The team's made a lot of progress, but we really are just establishing the foundation for the more detailed analysis that's yet to be done. And with your continued support, we can sustain that momentum necessary to produce data-centric analysis and understanding of the phenomena. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. This is
All
the
right,
third
here's
version
Carson.
of this task force, and to be frank, one of Congress's concerns is that the executive branch and administration, both parties, has been sweeping concerns about UAPs under the rug by focusing on events that can be explained and avoiding events that cannot be explained. What can you what can you say to give the American people confidence that you aren't just focusing our attention on low-hanging fruit with easy explanations?
Congressman,
See
I'll
that?
start.
Did you
and
catch
then,
that? You
Mr.
caught
Bray,
that, right?
Please feel free to weigh in. So the way that we're approaching this is with a more thorough, standardized methodology than what we have in the past. First and foremost, the Secretary of Defense is chartering this effort. This is not someone lower in the Department of Defense. And he has assigned that task to the Office of Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security, that's me, because I'm responsible for looking at intelligence matters, I'm responsible for security matters. This is potentially both.
Okay, so he's responsible for what did he just say, guys?
Security and defense.
Okay, that's going to come into play later. Okay, as we go forward.
So when you start concerning ourselves with the safety of our personnel, the safety of our installations and bases, there's no other higher priority than what we have than actually getting after this. And as you have stated, we have been assigned that task to actually stand up an office, the AIM-SOG, which I believe the name, sir, will likely change. But we have moved forward in terms of moving to establish that office. We have, as of this week, picked a director for that effort, a very established and
what a coincidence.
Accomplished individual. We've identified spaces. We've worked with personnel across the Department of Defense with the services, and we've worked with the IC, which is on board in helping us work through this standardized methodology for now, bringing in data, analyzing that data.
Okay, so anyway, guys, he keeps talking for about another good 3-4 minutes, but he never answers Carson's question, as far as I'm concerned.
Constantly deflects.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's a complete runaround. But it's very important that at the 22-minute mark, he did say some stuff that will come back eventually. And
yeah, that was important because
it's very important.
Carson, I believe it was, kind of beats the squatch out of him. It's great.
It's fair to say that you are a science fiction fan. Is that correct?
It is fair to say that I am an inquisitive mind, who has spent 40 years in the intelligence field and has focused on both
They're
science
trying
and
to
science
appeal
fiction.
to
That was
the
great.
younger
Yeah,
people
well,
here.
yeah, look,
Yeah.
my generation grew up looking at space sagas and the Apollo program. So all of us who grew up in the 60s were just thrilled by watching our first astronaut land on the moon. That was a momentous occasion to people who were of different generations. Some of them didn't believe that it happened. I still have relatives and friends who don't believe it happened, right? Science fiction to them. But to us, it was, no, that's the progress that we've made. And so I was enthralled by that, and I've taken that to heart. I enjoy the challenge of what may be out there. I have mentioned to you that, yes, I have followed science fiction. I have gone to conventions, even I'll say it on the record. Got to break the ice somehow. But, you know, I have done that, right? But there's nothing wrong with that. Don't necessarily dress up, but I do, you know, I do believe that it's important to show that the Department of Defense has, you know, we have character. And we're people just like you, just like the American people.
They're humanizing.
They're humanizing it. Right.
Our,
this is important for you guys to
our
pay attention to what's
inquisitiveness.
happening right here.
We have our questions. We want to know what's out there as much as you want to know what's out there. We get the questions not just from you, we get it from family members. And we get them night and day, not just in committee hearings. So finding what's out there is important. But first and foremost, it's important for us to do that so that we can ensure that our people, our personnel, our aviators, our bases and installations are
bases
safe.
and installations. He said that
And then
twice now.
curiosity
Okay, guys?
factor is something else.
That's the third time tonight it's
just
been
want to
mentioned.
know because
Yeah.
that's
All
the
together.
Bases.
It's
Just remember
you know,
bases.
that insatiable desire to know.
Thank you, sir. Ranking Member Crawford.
Mr. Realtor, you said you don't necessarily dress up. That wasn't a real strong statement. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
That was fun.
And thank you,
Excellent.
Mr. Mulder, for breaking the ice the way you did. Appreciate that. The inability to understand objects in our sensitive operating areas is tantamount to an intelligence failure that we certainly want to avoid. This is not about finding alien spacecraft, but about delivering dominant intelligence across the tactical, operational, and strategic spectrum. So my question is, how can AIMSOG lead to prevention of intelligence surprises?
Okay, this part
Sure, I'll start with
basically
that.
is a little boring.
so
So we're
with
just
all of
gonna
our efforts-
Yeah,
jump
because
through.
that's going to all fall mostly in the classified section.
It really, yeah, exactly.
So they're just going to give you a basic
Yeah.
rundown.
That aviator would do after landing as a part of their normal debriefing.
No,
They
this
would,
is your debriefing
contact their intelligence officer. Their intelligence
protocol.
officer would then walk them through first filing a data preservation to ensure that that whatever sensor data may be on the aircraft, that we preserve that so that it's available for later analysis. Second, they would actually fill out a form that includes details like where they were operating, altitudes they were operating, speeds, what they observed, whatever sensor data they may have recorded from that. And then that report is filed. It goes two places. One, it goes through the operational chain of command, so that operational units are aware of what's being observed, and also to the UAP task force, so that they can take that data, database it, and quite often have individuals from the task force contact the aviator and ask them additional questions if there were things that weren't clear in the report. That then goes into a database.
So basically, they're talking about the data collection from this point on for witnesses, pilots who
Yes.
see these things.
It's really standard. Like, I mean, that's basic standard military reporting for anything.
Yeah. So now it's just more open, I guess, is what they're really getting at here.
That's what it seems, yeah.
Yeah.
2004 and 2021, 80% of which were recorded on multiple instruments. And I take it with respect to some of those, you had a pilot seeing them if it was observed by a pilot,
Right.
and you had multiple instruments recording it. So you really have three sensors, the human sensor and two technical sensors detecting the object, is that?
For the majority of incidents that we had in the last year's report, the majority had multi-sensor data. When I talk about the 400 reports that
Multi-sensor.
we have now, that number will certainly go down because a lot of those new reports that we have are actually historic reports that are narrative-based. So that percentage will go.
Let's talk about this for a second because I found this interesting. In the beginning, they were not going to look at any historic reports.
They were going to start from scratch, essentially.
Right. So now they've adopted these 400 some anecdotal cases. Is that what he's kind of getting at here? And they're going to try to debunk them? What would be the point of this? This just seems like.
You want to know what it sounds like to me?
Go ahead.
I don't think this is an attempt at debunking those old cases. I think that these old cases have a lot of similarities
Data.
to some of the phenomena that are being experienced today.
Understood.
And they're seeing objects. Let's just use the Nimitz for a common example.
Yeah.
You can go back to the Nimitz case and look at that, and then go back to one of those other 400 plus antiquated reports and see similar technology being used, similar report being made.
Yeah.
That means that very likely it is not a terrestrial or a say it is not a piece of allied equipment.
Conventional? Is that what you're trying to get at?
It is not conventional.
Not conventional.
And if it were, then that means that either A, we have been phenomenally outpaced in our own technology and we don't know it because it's being concealed, or the rest of the world has phenomenally outpaced us with technology.
Understood.
And has kept it concealed for decades. I do not think either of those is the case.
Yeah,
that's just my personal opinion.
No, I absolutely would agree with you on that. What do you think, Dave?
I agree with what Joe is saying. It makes sense. It really does.
Now there might be some of those that they actually can bust up.
That destigmatization has resulted in more narrative reports.
And that's the object we're looking at right there now, right?
That's it right there.
Okay.
They are now looking at a UFO that has landed in
last year's report
the
also
committee
said that of
room,
those
I believe.
144, 18 of them
I don't know. I don't know what
reportedly
Commander Zorpazorp has made an
unusual
appearance.
flight
Commander
characteristics
Zorpazorp.
That's the new
appear
director,
to
guys.
demonstrate advanced technology.
It's the new director.
And some of them appeared to remain stationary.
This is actually good. I'm going to stop talking.
That's it right there.
This is important.
Okay.
So.
Last year's report also said that of those 144, 18 of them reportedly appeared to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, appear to demonstrate advanced technology, and some of them appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. That's pretty intriguing. And if you're able to answer this in this setting, are we aware of any foreign adversary capable of moving objects without any discernible means of propulsion?
I think I would, without discernible means of propulsion, I would say that we're not aware of any adversary that can move an object without discernible means of propulsion. The question then becomes, in many of these cases where we don't have a discernible mean of propulsion in the data that we have, in some cases there is likely sensor artifacts that may be hiding some of that. There's certainly some degree of something that looks like signature management that we have seen from some of these UAP, but what
does that mean, Joe? Signature management seen from some of these UAP. What is he getting at there?
So essentially it's what kind of data signature it leaves, or what kind of unit of measurement that can be discerned from its, I guess, being there would be the best way to put it.
So a signature management would be like cloaking, or could be jamming a radar signal, something like that.
It could be, aircraft, and I'm assuming I wasn't a sailor. I was Air Force. Aircraft and ships alike probably use very similar, I guess, data gathering methods, and they're really sensitive. Like you can't use a cell phone around them; it'll mess them up. You can't. You have to be on very restricted bandwidth for hand comms.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where if there is a signal that is strong enough, it could in fact disrupt or as you said, jam the receiving components.
Okay. That's what I was getting from it.
And Joe,
I would
go ahead.
As far as like some of the actual equipment, maybe tracks back too, is like, are we talking like they're using aerial, like AWACS, for example, to capture some misinformation, or what are we talking exactly?
I don't think that they addressed that in the video, but I mean, they could theoretically they could be using an AWACS, any kind of asset that we have that could actually gather data. I would imagine that potentially could be used. AWACS would be wise to use just because the altitude they fly and that net that they cover is just huge. But depending on depending on what kind of frequency and what kind of energy displacement might possibly be taking place, it might render those devices inoperable, or at least momentarily inoperable until the signature or signal is gone.
Sure.
That's interesting too. I can't go into detail because obviously this is seen by so many people, but I have a person that's close to me who actually flies those AWACS. I would love to pick his brain to see what he has to say, because he's fairly he's at a very important level.
Sure.
So. Yeah.
Most people who are on those birds are.
They're privy to some very
there's
exactly.
We don't have that large of an AWACS I guess fleet. Yeah.
Well, and if you've noticed actually too, now this has nothing to do with this video we're watching, but they've actually been flying over top of our hometown, the three of us, Charleston.
That is a Navy version, right, Joe?
Yep.
It's a lot smaller.
It is smaller. It's the Navy version. They've been landing at the 130th in Charleston, doing refuels and going back up,
which is very cool to watch.
Yeah.
Number of events in which we do not have an explanation, and there are a small handful in which there are flight characteristics or signature management that we can't explain with the data that we have. We'll continue. Those are obviously the ones that are.
So he just admitted that there's some things that they cannot explain at all. That's significant. Okay. That is very significant.
Yeah.
Now we're going to fast forward up to probably one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. Was it about the 43-minute mark? This was pretty epic.
Yes.
So let's go up to 42:55.
Goes onto the SLR camera as a triangle.
And have we, in order to prove that hypothesis, flown a drone and observed it with that same technology to see whether we can?
What he's asking right here is, have you tried to replicate this theory that you have, that these were just lens flare? Okay.
Small triangles. The hypothesis is that those are commercial drones that, because of the use of night vision goggles, appear like triangles. Is that the operating assessment?
Some type of drone, some type of unmanned aerial system, and it is simply that light source resolves itself through the night vision goggles onto the SLR camera as a triangle.
And have we, in order to prove that hypothesis, flown a drone and observed it with that same technology to see whether we can reproduce the effect?
UAP Task Force is aware of studies that have done that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
They're aware of studies that have done that. No, they have not done it themselves.
Yeah.
And furthermore, there is another little telling part here about that. He just said that they were drones. Joe has already told us that our armed forces do not fly drones over top of each other without telling, one another what's going on. They've already pretty much ruled out that these were anything from China, from Russia, from any other foreign government. Yet their triangular shape is based only because they're looked at through these night vision goggles, and it's a bokeh. Okay, that's fine and good. You just explained away the shape or the bokeh. You didn't explain away what they were. We still don't know what they were or what they were doing in a restricted naval space. So, as try as much as they like, they couldn't really deflect that. Now it gets good.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Winstrup.
Pay attention,
Mr.
kids.
Chairman,
It gets
thank you
real.
all for being here. My first question is, through this process where there's been sightings, have the sightings been stationary, or have they always been sighted from a moving object, from a plane or a ship that may be moving? Have these reports ever come from a stationary object being observed in the sky?
There it is.
The UAP task force does have
Yep.
reports from stationary, reports from a stationary observer.
Because there's a difference observing something when you're moving as
Right.
well. It's physics, right? So that's
Right.
why I asked that question. Are we capable, or have we made any breakthroughs, or anyone made any breakthroughs to be able to cite something and make some determination at all of its composition, whether it's a solid or a gas? Is there any such capability?
From
Not asking what, I'm just
right from some of the returns. I mean, it's clear that that the majority, well, it's clear that many of the observations we have are physical objects from the sensor data that we have.
Physical objects.
Well, gas is a physical object. It can be, and so, and you see where I'm going with this. I'm trying to determine what it is we're looking at. So if we can decide if something is a solid or a gas, and if there have been any conclusion on its capabilities, like its capabilities of movement, of turning, going, 180 degrees or 90-degree turn, anything along that line that we've been able to determine.
Within the, and again, I should point out that that there is not a single explanation for UAP. There are a lot of different things that are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Basically, we really don't know very much on that. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I'm pleased that you have protocol right now for our military, but are there any non-military reports coming forward of similar events, or is it all coming from military?
The UAP task force has a very good working relationship with the FAA. They have very good working relationship with other parts of the U.S. government, so that we can ingest reports from.
Do we have
from
any
those sources.
reports non-military?
Yes.
Thank you. That's my question. And do we need to put out protocol for civilians that may be in that arena, like through FAA? Do you think that would be appropriate and helpful?
I think standardized reporting, without a doubt, is key to helping us get to ascertain what some of these are.
I think it would be important as well.
That said, guys, if you have a sighting that you want to report, head over to wildandweirdwv.com, click on the sightings tab.
There are. That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're probably going to be
all of our
looking at it a little
allies,
closer.
or is it allies and adversaries?
wait.
What have we learned publicly?
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
That was actually kind of
that goes to my
important.
next question. Publicly, have others made anything which would not have to be considered closed? I don't want you to answer what they've said necessarily.
Allies have seen these. China has established its own version of a UAP task force. So clearly, a number of countries have observations of things in the airspace that they can't identify.
And do we share data with some, with all? Are they sharing with us?
We share data with some, and some share data with us.
But not necessarily all that have publicly reported something?
That's correct.
Okay.
One little point, Ron.
And I think that's
I mean, just to bring something up, China actually, they bring up China. And as you guys know, China has vastly increased their capacity in the new space race.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting and significant that he specifically points out China, and they've talked with China about this.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
You know,
An important thing, and for the other session, actually, that we don't discuss that now, because, you know, obviously something like this can be a national security challenge for us, no doubt.
national security challenge. Yet again.
Thank you,
Yep.
Mr.
Now,
Chairman.
this guy.
One of the objectives of this open hearing is to try to erode some of the stigma that attaches to, in particular, our military men and women reporting this. It's obviously really very serious because should one of our adversaries have developed a technology that we don't know about it, we need to know about it yesterday. And obviously, any sort of stigma that prevents our military from reporting this data as comprehensively as possible is a national security threat. So I really just have two questions in the service of that goal. The first is, the chairman asked that we run that video again. Most people, when they see a video, we're all used to seeing things from a car.
Okay, we're not going to watch that, but we want to hear his second question.
A electronic observation, infrared or whatever, looks radically different. A visual observation that was distant on
Described there, that there is a lot of information from too little data on it would be in our database and it would be unresolved.
I would add to that it's insufficient.
Initiative to study UFO.
No, wait.
everything that you can't explain
There.
is in a bucket called data. Is that correct? And that would mean data collected by sensors, visual observations, everything that we can't explain, quote unquote, is in a bucket called data.
Right. A narrative report from the early 2000s, if it just had a little bit of information on it, would be in our database and it would be unresolved.
I would add to that it's insufficient data. I mean, that's one of the challenges we have. Insufficient data either.
Let's see, 50.
A visual observation that was distant on a foggy night, we don't know what it is, to we've found an organic material that we can't identify, right? Those are radically different worlds. So when you say we can't explain,
This
give
is
the
important.
public a little bit better sense of where on that spectrum of we can't explain we are. Are we holding materials, organic or inorganic, that we don't know about? Are we, picking up emanations that are something other than light or infrared that could be deemed to be communications? Give us a sense for what you mean when you say we can't.
Pay attention to what he says here.
Sure. When I say we can't explain, I mean exactly as you described there, that there is a lot of information like the video that we showed in which there's simply too little data to create a reasonable explanation. There are a small handful of cases in which we have more data that our analysis simply hasn't been able to fully pull together a picture of what happened. And those are the cases where we talk about where we see some indications of flight characteristics or signature management that are not what we had expected.
There it is again.
When it comes to material that we have no material. We have detected no emanation.
We have no.
Within the UAP task force
within
that
the
is,
UAP task force
that would suggest it's anything non-terrestrial in origin. So there's
You got that,
when I say
right?
unexplained, I mean everything from too little data to
within the
we
UAP
simply,
task force. That is important because what did we say before? What about those subcontracts?
Facing in many of these instances, Congressman.
Understood. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to join this hearing. I really appreciate the witness's testimony.
This
Mr.
guy
Moultrie, as the
asked some
chairman
hard questions.
mentioned, DOD had an initiative to study UFOs in the 1960s
This is
called
interesting.
Project Blue Book. It's also been well reported in our briefing and in other places that we have more recent projects, specifically ATIP. Could you describe any other initiatives that the DOD or DOD contractors have managed after Project Blue Book ended and prior to ATIP beginning? Did anything also predate Project Blue Book?
Did anything predate Project Blue Book that
That's
they
an
don't
interesting-
already know about is what he's
Yeah.
asking. What could he be referring to?
So I can't speak to what may have predated Project Blue Book. I mean, of course, there's Roswell and all these other things that people have talked about over the years. I'm familiar with Blue Book. I'm familiar with ATIP. I haven't seen other documented studies that have been done by DOD in that regard.
So you're not aware of anything in between Project Blue Book and ATIP?
I'm not aware of anything that's official. that was
Official.
done.
I'm not aware of anything that's
Hasn't
official.
been brought to my attention.
Okay.
Non-classified.
Additionally, are you aware of any other
Official.
DOD or DOD contract programs focused on UAPs from a technological engineering perspective? And by that, I mean, are you aware of any technology initiatives focused on this topic other than initiatives focused on the individual case investigations?
I am not aware of any contractual programs that are focused.
What do you say?
on,
Contractual.
anything related to.
There's those disclaimers.
other than
So every time he
the
asks
Navy
him these
Task Force
questions,
and
he
what we're about to
responds
launch
with
in terms of our
contractual
effort.
or official.
Same question for you, Mr. Bray.
Same answer, not aware of anything outside what we are doing in the UAP task force.
So just to confirm, you're not aware of any technology or engineering resources that have been focused on these efforts besides what we've mentioned today?
Once again, I'll say no contractual.
Again, he says no
or,
contractual.
Programmatic efforts.
Or
that are
programmatic.
involved. The reason why I qualify it
Explain.
that way. Yeah, let me qualify it that way.
So anyway, he basically says, well, we're not responsible for people who just have side projects.
Right.
That's
Pretty much.
out there. In
Now this one,
CBMs were rendered
this,
besides what we've, other than initiatives focused on the individual case investigations.
I am not aware of,
let's see if I
I
can.
can't speak to that. I speak to official programs that we have on the record.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed
Here we
in
go.
interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just ranges, but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in
Pay
which 10 of our
attention to
nuclear
their
ICBMs were
actual
rendered
face.
inoperable at the same time. A
Look at
glowing
his
red
face.
orb was
Yep.
observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray.
Any-
The last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Yeah.
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
So you've
Oh.
just seen informal stories, no official assessment that you've done or exists within DOD that you're aware of regarding the Malmstrom incident?
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance, the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
That's BS.
Well, I would say, I mean, it's a pretty high-profile incident.
Yeah.
I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that
I like
are out
it.
there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our
So
attention.
how would it have to be officially brought to your
Usually
attention?
an
I'm
official-
bringing it to your
Sure,
attention.
so-
This is pretty official.
So we'll go back and take a look at it, but generally there is some authoritative figure that says there is an incident that occurred. We'd like you to look at this. But in terms of just tracking what may be in the media that says that something occurred at this time, at this place, there are probably a lot of leads that we would have to follow up on. I don't think we are resourced to do that right now.
Well, I don't claim to be an authoritative
Warming.
figure, but for what it's worth, I would like you to look into it. And
Sure.
if for no other reason, you could dismiss it and say this is not worth wasting resources on.
Will do.
And then finally, are you aware of a document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Notes Memo?
Out of left field.
I am not.
You're not.
I'm not personally aware of that.
Okay.
There's that. Okay.
It's a document in which.
Please
again,
pay attention to that little thing he does. Did you notice though?
He looks over at him and is kind of,
And he does that little. He did the exact same thing with the Maelstrom question, by the way.
yeah.
The exact.
I'm not commenting on
same
the veracity. I was hoping you would help me with that, in which a former head of DIA claims to have had a conversation with the Dr. Eric Wilson and claims to have sort of been made aware of certain contractors or DoD programs that he tried to get fuller access to and was denied access to. So you're not aware of that.
I'm not aware, Congressman.
In my 10 seconds remaining, then I guess
Watch.
I just would
Hit
ask
list
Mr.
right
Chairman
now.
unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
He just entered the Wilson documents
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
into
it.
the records
Yep.
of this hearing.
Mr. Murthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to
Now,
both of you for
That's
appearing
kind of
today and for the public
significant,
service.
guys. I mean,
First question is, there have been no collisions between
Well,
any
pause real
U.S.
quick.
assets in one of these UAPs.
yeah.
So tell the listeners why the Wilson documents are
Well, the Wilson documents are important because, they showed up a few years ago and within those documents, there are mentions of things such as esoteric connections to UAP, aliens, extra dimensionals, wormholes. There's mentions to a project called, what was it called? Majestic 12. There are all these little things that are in there that, were immediately debunked. I mean, I never really paid much attention to the thing because I was like, well, it just looked too good to be true.
Yeah.
And it was debunked so fast, which, that's always kind of a red flag when something gets debunked so fast too. But now that I'm hearing it brought up in this committee, I have to really think about that a little bit more.
The veracity of the document.
Yeah. So we're going to link. Yeah.
Especially when he says, I'd like to add this to the official record.
It's added to the official record. Now, what's that going to mean? I don't know. But we'll add a link to those documents and let you guys make up your own mind on that stuff. I mean, I don't know. At this point.
When he says he wants it added to the record, one, he wants those documents added to the record.
Yeah.
Like those documents will be linked when you go back to try to look this up.
Yeah.
They'll be attached there.
And
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
I was just say, I like to pay attention to body language. From working in a career, I used to be in corrections and stuff, and that's one of our things that we're taught is to watch body language. Some of our training. You just watch the body language with both of these guys, and especially these last 20 minutes or so of this hearing, that from what we can see publicly, they're really squirming in their seats a lot more and more.
They really are. Yeah, because they're in the hot seat at this point. And so now they're going to be talking about collisions. So
he's correct.
We have not had a collision. We've had at least 11 near misses, though.
So there's been 11 near misses.
Maybe we'll talk about those 11 near misses or any place where there's close proximity. And I assume we've
physical objects. Most of them represent physical objects. There could be some that are more of a meteorological phenomena, something like that, that may not be a physical object in the sense that most people think of something you could go up and touch.
But the ones where you say most of them represent physical objects, can you say that they are definitely, like with 100% certainty, that they are physical objects?
I can say with certainty that a number of these are physical objects.
Okay, so we can't rule out that some of them may not be physical objects.
So, some certainly could be a sensor anomaly or something like that.
He didn't ask
some
that.
Could be.
Now, how about with regard to UAPs? We've talked about UAPs on training areas, but obviously there's some sensor bias. I would think we put sensors in training areas. How about with regard to non-training areas? Do we track what's in open source and what civilians and others have tracked? And have we found similarities to what they've observed in terms of UAPs in non-training areas to the ones that are in training areas?
The UAP task force has worked very hard to make sure the data set that we're working with is a data set that we have very good control over that data. So we have some.
In other words, they don't want to hear from you or me, but we want to hear from you. So yeah, if you've had any sightings and you'd like, to get those into a record, by all means, contact us and let's put them into the collective so everybody can see this stuff, right?
Yep, because we've been making maps of these sighting reports, trying to look for patterns, anything like that. So if you're listening and you have seen something weird, send it in.
And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And historically, the general public, has had some of the most significant sightings ever.
That is true. That is absolutely true, Dave.
And the general public has also led the charge on UFO research for the last 5 decades.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has attracted a lot of interest in people that are curious about this hearing today. As we talk about, and I would say there's a lot of what I would call amateur interest groups that are involved in the UAP field. My question is,
You just
when
mentioned it.
there are
It's us.
unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there.
No, that's them. See, now they're
What are
talking
the
about themselves.
consequences for people that are involved with that or groups that are involved with that?
So one of
Approval?
the concerns that we have is that there are a lot of
All you weird Facebook UFO
individuals
groups are
and
coming
groups
for
that
you.
are putting information out there that that could be considered to be somewhat self-serving. We're trying to do what's in the best interest of, one, the Department of Defense, and then two, what's in the best interest of the public, to ensure that we can put factual-based information back into the mainstream and back into the bloodstream of the.
Now, that's scary, guys. That's scary, because if you don't know what he just said, he literally just said, we are going to tell you what's real.
Yep.
We're going to tell you what's not real.
Control the narrative.
Control the narrative. Exactly. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here. This has nothing to do with that, but that is his own words. And we see this already through certain social media platforms. We've seen this on Facebook. We've seen this on YouTube. We've seen this. It's happening. They are trying to control a narrative for whatever reason. Maybe it is a genuine reason. Maybe they don't want, everyone to think that Commander Zorpazorp's going to land on, June 21st, and what's it hurt anyone to believe that he is? That's my question. What does it really hurt that? Because most of us researchers, well, yeah, but most of us researchers already know, and it doesn't really affect us as much, right? I mean, it's kind of like what Jess talks about, the whole, the entertainment, the paratainment,
Yeah.
It's dangerous to research, but it's still, to me, that's free speech. It just needs a little disclaimer at the bottom, this is for entertainment purpose only.
We do need a way, though, to weed out these bad reports or the fraudulent reports that,
Right.
Susie's seeing stars every night.
Yes.
And thinking they're UFOs and reporting them in to their local UFO hotline.
Right.
Or, you've got Johnny down the road that, saw bolide flash in the sky, and there's an extra dimensional UFO that warped into our reality and then right back out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And they go and they talk to these groups and they bolster these belief systems and these other people. But it's not so dissimilar to what, most belief groups work on, religion, all that, right? Spirituality. They kind of all bolster each other in a way.
Right.
But it's dangerous for this because we can see where this possibly could go, is what I'm getting at. I don't want censorship. I want us to be able to make up our own minds, is what I'm trying to say. I don't need a robot to tell me what's real. I don't need a committee to tell me what's real.
And,
we just need to look at the data.
And during over the second half of this, they basically mentioned the media 2 or 3 times in this. Oh, and I have a hilarious comparison to that. If either one of you have seen Men in Black, the movie here, there's when they're looking for the aliens, what do they look at? They're looking at all the different newspapers and tabloids.
Yeah.
That's
where you find the best information. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true, bud. I mean,
control the narrative, and that's what that is. So more or less.
Good point, man.
Reporting media that we have, so people understand what's there. It's important because we are attempting, as this hearing has drawn out, to understand, one, what may just be natural phenomenon, two, what may be sensor phenomenology or things that were happening with sensors, three, what may be legitimate counterintelligence threats to places that we have or bases or installations, or security threats to our platforms. And anything that diverts us off of what we have with the resources that have been allocated to us, send us off in these spurious chases and hunts that are just not helpful. And they also they also contribute to the undermining of the confidence that the Congress and the American people have that we are trying to get to the root cause of what's happening here, report on that, and then feed that back into our national security apparatus so we are
Well,
able
he
to
just mentioned a
protect
root
the
cause, but they
American
already
people and our
said that the
allies. So
UAPs have
it is
multiple
harmful, it is hurtful, but
causes,
hopefully
right?
if we get more
Yeah.
information out there, we'll start to lessen the impact
What's
of
the
some of these
root?
spurious reports.
Yeah.
So,
What's the
so
root?
just taking that a step further, so that misinformation, false narratives, manufactured. So what are the consequences? Are there legal consequences? Are there examples that you can give us where people have been held accountable by this misinformation or disinformation?
I can't give you, any examples where somebody's been legally held liable for putting something out there, but
Well, I guess what's the deterrent from people
Dowdy.
engaging in this activity?
I don't know. I don't have that answer. That's
Well,
something
Moultrie, what you
that,
should have said there was
welcome
there isn't
dialogue with
one. There's something
Congress
called free
to
speech.
talk about that with the members
And,
to, help legislate those
that's
laws.
not our
and say
thing.
What should be the legal ramifications that we could use to potentially hold individuals accountable, whether it be citizens or information that might be injected into.
You heard that, right? Citizens.
Well,
media
here's
by
the problem
other,
with this
other
right here.
You just heard this.
If he said that they'd be willing to work with legislators to construct laws and this, that, and the other for false reporting.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is, as soon as you create a law, you create the ability for said law to be abused.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right, 100%. And I don't think we need to say anything more about that, honestly. That's what you just said. Abused and, abuse the witnesses as well. I mean,
It further controls the narrative.
Yeah.
Forces or other countries, if you will.
Gentlemen, what seems incredibly difficult for you is that there's two almost competing but different narratives. One is no one knows whether there's extraterrestrial life. It's a big universe, and it would be pretty presumptuous to have a hard and fast conclusion. And then if there is, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there is some exploration coming here. And that underlies
and Carl Sagan just rolled over.
I think Mr. LaHood was asking about that. People think there must be extraterrestrial life, and it's not at all beyond the pale that there would be a visit here. On the other hand, as the DoD, you have the responsibility to make sure that our national security is protected, and that if there are surveillance drones or active drones that can disable our systems, that has to be analyzed, has to be stopped. So how do you divide how do you separate your responsibilities where you get all these reports from folks who maybe in good faith, maybe not, believe that you should be investigating every possible report of a extraterrestrial incident? I'll start with you, Mr. Moultrie.
Sure, indeed, Congressman, and thank you for the question. It's important that we, as a part of this effort, really build out the relationship that we have with others, including NASA, and for the reasons that you just pointed out. So there are elements in our government that are engaged in looking for life in other places, and they have been doing that for decades. Right? They've been searching for extraterrestrial life.
That's significant.
There are astrobiologists who have been doing this too. We're a part of that same government, and so our goal is not to potentially cover up something if we were to find something. It's to understand what may be out there, examine what it may mean for us, if there are any, from a defense perspective, any national security implications or ramifications. But then to work with organizations as appropriate, if it's a weather phenomenology with NOAA, if it's a potential for extraterrestrial life or an indication of extraterrestrial life, with someone like NASA.
So the transparency actually is very important.
Completely.
For public consumption.
Ron.
Completely.
I'm rolling my head.
We're going to have a classified briefing, and without going into the details,
Dave had something.
Kinds of secrets.
Yeah, I'll say pause that for a second, because there's a contradiction here. I'm sure you guys noticed it. Maybe.
Well, I heard two of them, but go ahead.
Well, yeah. There's definitely more than one. But what hit me is like they talk about not having information going back to a certain point. Like he didn't know anything really. He was aware of Blue Book or was
Mhm.
aware of Roswell, for example, but didn't really like, he was kind of like, well, I don't really have much on that really, and it's more or less what he's trying to say. And then now he's talking about they're going so far back.
Yeah.
This has been going on, so he completely. I mean, to me, that's a huge contradiction.
Well, it's a huge contradiction on his part also to say that he's the guy who knows defense, yet he was not aware of the Maelstrom incident. He was not apparently aware of any of the nuclear incursions. There wasn't just Maelstrom, by the way. There was how many different ones? I mean, we can put the list up. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
we've
massive.
covered them on previous episodes.
Yeah, I mean, there's Bentwaters, for God's sake. I mean, he's not aware of that. This is his job.
Well, and we're talking like, and Joe will know more on this, but obviously, like we're talking like black budget types of things.
Yes.
And as we've always heard, the government within government, because
Yeah.
that's a necessary
It's true.
thing. I mean,
It's true.
there has to be
Yes.
government within government.
There does.
There's top secret.
There has to be. Yes, that's not what we're going against here.
Yeah.
We're not trying to tell, we're not on the side of, let's release every bit of data that we can. And, because some of that data it's damning to our national security. That's true.
And it's real possible they're not privy to a lot of that information as well.
That's right. Yeah. I think so as well.
You look at the government within the government.
Here, what is it? What are we protecting? I don't know if you can answer this question in this open forum, but in fact, your perception of what it is we have to quote protect.
So I think right now what's really important for us to protect is how we know certain things. So there are a lot of things that we know, whether it be about the thinking of other leaders around the world, the weapon systems that are being developed.
Wait,
how we
did he just say that hang on, let me just make sure I heard that correct.
What are we protecting? I don't know if you can answer this question in this open forum, but in fact, your perception of what it is we have to quote protect.
So I think right now what's really important for us to protect is how we know certain things. So there are a lot of things that we know, whether it be about the thinking of other leaders around the world, the weapon systems that are being developed, or how we detect things that may be threats to us. Many of those things are the result of some of our most sensitive sources and methods, and we'll use those things not just for this effort.
I did not answer the question at all.
How people are thinking? Did he just really admit that? Did he say that, or was that?
There's a few ways that you can read that, though.
I'm going to hear that your way, and then I'm going to hear it my way. So my way is a little more esoteric. What's yours?
My way is that we have spies who are on these people's committees in other governments.
We're still on spies. I'm on spies too. I'm just on a different type of spy.
Who work within their organizations and mole and leak out information back to us on what they're thinking, what their goals are, where their projects are moving, etc.
See, I like your more conventional thought as to my, remote viewing thought. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we've covered that before too. I mean,
yes,
it's
absolutely.
a government program. It was actually
a government
theirs.
program.
So.
It was theirs. Yes.
Same sources and methods are used to help protect us from adversaries and from others who might mean to do us harm. There aren't separate UAP sensors. There's not a separate UAP processing computer. There's not a separate UAP dissemination chain.
Not
or whatever.
yet.
So it's the same
That's why
process.
we're here.
It's
We
the
need
same
funding
system
for these
that we have
things.
that helps us do all that. We need to protect that because this is something that we're looking at, but we're sure there are going to be other things that we'll look at in the future that will need those same sensors, we'll need those same sources and methods to help us do. So we're protecting the fact of that this nation has developed capabilities that enable us to know what may be threats to us and to counter those threats before they become something of a national issue.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both you, Mr. Bray, and you, Mr. Moultrie, for your appearance today. I yield back.
Meant to protect any knowledge.
Just over the last.
We have data on that, and it simply remains unresolved. Does not mean it resolves to being something, right, that is easily explainable or difficulty, or well, obviously it resolves to being something that is difficult to explain. But I can't point to something that definitively was not man-made, but I can point to a number of examples in which remain unresolved.
Gotcha. With regard to videos that have appeared in open source channels, for example, the Tic Tac video, does AIMSOG maintain control of videos, and how do you prevent leaks of potentially classified videos or other material?
So the AIMSOG, as we established an organization,
He just gave
we
him the
will
green
have
light to talk about it.
a process
Yeah.
for classified and compartmented holdings, and we will find a way of getting positive control over those. We have our sensitive access programs and special access programs that allow us to put what we call SAPs around things, and then there's controlled access programs that allow us to put caps around things. So we'll have that in place. Our
Joe, is this
goal will
gonna
be
explain the SAPs,
ensuring
caps
that we're
thing?
sharing that with the
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah. Where he mentioned SAPs and caps, is that something you know enough to explain on?
If it's what I think it is, one is a security protocol, the other one's a control protocol. Now,
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure SAPS is control or security.
Security.
But caps, I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
I know that the P stands for protocol.
Like a security access protocol?
Yeah, I think
Something
SAPS
of
is
that
security
nature.
access protocol. Caps, I'm not 100% sure about.
the appropriate analysts and the appropriate exploiters, if you will, who can look at that data too. What we don't want to do is bring something into a DoD database or a DoD holding and then have so many wrappers around it, it's not available to those who really need to look at it and to exploit it. And that's one of the reasons we're establishing relationships with the interagency, with the IC and others to be able to do that, sir. But we will.
Frequency energy associated with UAP sightings.
Yes.
In which some of the UAP appear to remain stationary, winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion.
He doesn't like that
It goes on to say, in a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. I couldn't tell from that whether that small number of cases was a part of the subset of 18, that is, among the 18 which appeared to move with unusual pattern or flight characteristics, did some of those also emit radio frequency energy?
There's a look. Boom.
I would
There
have
was
to
the look,
check
yep.
with our UAP task force on that. I believe, without getting into specifics that we can do in the closed session, at least some that we have detected RF emissions from were not behaving oddly otherwise.
And the significance of measuring that radio frequency energy is what? That we suspect that this was some form of aircraft in which there were radio transmissions?
The biggest thing that you're looking for there is any indication of an effort to jam whatever sensors that we may have looking at it.
But I would also add to that radio frequency, as you know, Congressman, is used to control various platforms too. So the fact of emanations coming off of any platform, whether it be a UAV or another platform, could be radio frequency activity related to that entity transmitting out or something transmitting to that platform. And of course, we have a sensitivity with our airborne platforms of picking it up, which is one of the reasons that we try to prevent people from using their cell phones on airplanes and things like that. It's very sensitive to RF emanations. So that's a part of what we'll be looking at in the AIMSOG. What is this? Is this something that we can collect on, and can we start to characterize the signaling environment around the emanations that may be coming off of some of these UAPs?
So that energy then that was recorded could be either an effort to jam, or it could be an effort to control a UAV, or any other communication with that craft.
I would say that's accurate.
Right.
The look.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, he gave the look. Now, the thing
gave
is,
the
like,
look,
As the ODNI report makes
Yeah.
clear, one possible explanation for UAPs is that we are detecting U.S. aircraft, either secret air programs or even test prototypes. I won't ask you in this setting, obviously, to describe any secret DoD programs. That said, I do want to make sure the U.S. government isn't chasing its own tail. Firstly, do you have a clear and repeatable process to check with compartmented programs about whether a UAP sighting is attributable to a U.S. aircraft? Secondly, does the AIMSOG staff have the clearances and read-ons that they need to investigate all of these incidents? And thirdly, when your staff cannot be read on, are your questions to those who are read on even being answered?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass that to Mr. Bray. So we're very conscious of the potential blue-on-blue issue or U.S. on U.S. And so we've established relationships with organizations and entities that are potentially flying or developing platforms for their own interests, if you will. And our goal is to continue, and we have a repeatable process. I think we've had that process for some time, to deconflict activities that we may have to ensure that we are not potentially reporting on something that may be a developmental platform or a U.S. operational platform that is performing either testing or performing a mission. So we will have that in place. We've already had those discussions with organizations and entities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their equities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their sources and methods while also getting at what we have here. We want to be able to deconflict those.
Absolutely. The UAP Task Force has had a process in place to work with other elements of the Department of Defense and other elements of the government to ensure that that there's an as simple a way as possible to deconflict those. And when we reference that in the report, I should say that we were simply accounting for the fact that there could possibly be one or two data points that had leaked through, but we were quite confident that was not the explanation.
How are you all liaisoning with Space Command? Specifically, how are you partnering with the parts of the U.S. Space Command responsible for space domain awareness? And how, if at all, are you partnering with the Space Force to analyze UAPs?
Look at that look.
The UAP Task Force has a very good relationship with Space Force, as it does with the rest of the Department of Defense. We have pulled analysts in from Space Force to ensure that that we're availing ourselves of that expertise, as well as any other material they may have that would be helpful.
And Congressman, as you know, Space Force and Space Command, they have responsibility for space domain awareness. So what we've done, we coordinated with Space Force, we coordinated with their J2, and she is on board in terms of helping us plug into what they have and for us to have this interactive exchange of information and data. And we're doing that with all the services, not just with Space Force or Space Command.
Joe, is it possible for all the forces to actually work together as he's claiming here?
You don't see it that often. Air Force has been the most tightly lipped with all of this information since ever.
Yeah,
and,
since ever. Yeah.
They're even more tightly lipped. They haven't released any of their declassified stuff or stuff that could be declassified as far as the UFO reports. They haven't released any of that to where anybody can see it. It's only been Navy. And for anybody who doesn't know, the Air Force closely works with the Army. The Navy closely works with the Marines. The Marines segued out of the Navy. The Army segued, the Air Force segued away from the Army because it used to be the Army Air Corps. Now Space Force has done the same thing with the Air Force, where it has branched away because Space Command was actually part of the Air Force for the longest time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You'll see cooperation through joint task force stuff, but you're not going to get a whole lot of cooperation. And it's not necessarily involuntary, but you're just not going to get all these guys to work together. It's like herding cats.
Oh, yeah. Well, that pretty much concluded the whole thing. They actually went into a break for a couple hours, and then they came back at noon, and they had a top secret or a classified brief on the stuff they couldn't tell us. Guys, that was the big hearing. So What's your takeaway on this? Final thoughts, and I'm curious as to what you think the future is going to hold of this. I know that we get another one of these, I think next year, as per the protocol or whatever the agreement was that was made. So what do you think, Joe? You go first.
Well, me and you had spoke previously today, and what I see is a more open source Project Blue Book.
Mm-hmm.
I see a more civilian friendly Project Blue Book, but I don't see them behaving a whole lot differently than the goal of to try to explain.
With limitations, like what you're saying. More open, but with limitations.
Right. Like, we're acknowledging that it exists, and we're going to give you some information, but still overall, like I said, Moultrie just kind of seems like he's the guy that was picked to come in and help explain away a lot of this stuff, and say that, that guy right up there was an owl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of seems like that's his job. And because he said multiple times that, that they want to try to explain these things off. They want to debunk them, essentially. What's going to happen, though, is they're going to see these data sets are going to be very difficult to debunk. So what will happen, in my opinion, is they will get brushed under the rug. They will fall into the classified category. And the only thing that gets classified will actually be stuff that they can debunk, as possibly it could even be as illogically as possible.
To add what you're saying, Joe, it's like, a lot of these people are appointed to these positions. And, when I was referring to like government within government, like the black budget operations and all that, well, all those people that are in with those groups are long-term, I guess you say employees, but and then these ones that are appointed, like federal appointees to the different positions, like director of whichever agency, like director of NSA or whatever, I would, and maybe you can tell me give me your opinion, but I would think they would be not quite as privy to all the information because they may only get in there for 4 years. I mean, they're not going to be in there for as long. So why would we give them that information, all this grand information?
A lot of this stuff it is, like you said, it's compartmentalized, and you get it on a need to know basis.
Yeah.
And because again, many of these guys are appointees under a president. Sometimes their terms are 4 years, sometimes their terms are 8, but oftentimes through a 4 or 8 year term, these guys get replaced like underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to be like, here's all of our secrets.
Right.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
2 months later, this guy gets fired, and they bring in another guy. Here's all of our secrets. They're not going to do that. They're only going to give them the information that is required for them to perform a task. Because otherwise, and it's not because they're being malicious, in my opinion. It's just because they're not
security.
It's security, and it's also a whole lot of labor.
Yeah.
Like, why do all the extra work to just give them way more than what they need to effectively do their job?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and my understanding of people that work in the within the secrecy, within that whole intelligence community, especially, let's say, I'll give an example. My understanding, like, let's just say Area 51. I'm not going conspiracy theory. I'm just talking Area 51 as a military base. When they're working on secret aircraft, like, some of it, maybe it's conventional now, but secret aircraft that's been developed, that I've always heard that they will have like different sections. It's working maybe on a different part. Maybe one section's engine, one, but they won't be privy to one another's work until a certain point.
That's the engineers department. They will work on like, there were times whenever I was given technical orders on drain systems, and I would have to fabricate drain systems by hand or something. I didn't know.
No idea why.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was for. I just knew that we need these made. Make them. And so
that's all you needed to know to accomplish the mission, your mission.
Right. That's all I needed to know for my job was just make these. Here's the specs we need. Here's the pressure they need to hold, all that kind of stuff. So that way I knew what materials to use, and then went from there. It was very compartmentalized on some of these projects. Now some other aircrafts, like you can go look up a technical order on a C-130 right now, and download it off the internet, and if you have the time and money, you can build a freaking oh gosh, what's the Lockheed Martin C-130 out in your garage?
Oh yeah.
But there is one of the most probably recognizable aircraft was the SR-71.
Yes.
For this kind of project, the paint application, top secret.
Yep. Top secret.
The metal wasn't so top secret, but the paint application that was the real hard thing. And so unless you used it, you didn't have access to it. Now, like my job, what we did, we had to have top secret clearance because we had to handle stealth materials. So we had to have clearance to be able to use them. Now the guy next door, the load masters or the crew chiefs, they might not have that clearance. I didn't know who had and who didn't have clearance. All I knew is when we had parts in our shop, they stayed in our shop until we put them on the plane.
Yeah.
It's like the information is being released, like when you say compartmentalized, the information to the public, us, it's almost appears as it's being released, it's being compartmentalized to us. At some point in the future,
it does seem that way.
Maybe when some big event happens, and so I know it's still Joe's turn on this because you were asking Joe his turn, his thoughts and stuff. But
no, you're fine.
You're fine.
The point that I was going to make on that, like kind of a point for me, is like when we talk about compartmentalizing all this, I think for it to come out to the public, to where it's not just a little bit of bits and pieces, there's going to be some major event, some major, if you want to get really crazy, there's going to have to be a UFO to show up. Let's say Independence Day type scenario.
Yeah.
And there it is above the city. It's like, oh crap, it's real. Then, like where they're slowly giving it the bits and pieces, but now that it seems like they're backtracking a little bit more than what they were over the past year, which kind of, we can only speculate on that, but it kind of raises concerns in my mind because, like, well, why are they backpedaling a little bit now than what they were a year ago? Or 2 years ago.
Well, are they though, or did the media just grab it and run and start screaming aliens at the top of their lungs? We have to ask this too, because let's be honest, ratings went up for a lot of those media platforms after that.
It did,
report, right?
Everybody was looking into all that stuff, but like back to my personal thoughts on it. It is a powder blue book. Blue book light.
I agree. I agree. What about you, Dave? What are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, basically, what I was explaining, kind of going off of what Joe was talking about, the way that the information is being released to us, because these hearings are great, and I'm glad we have them.
Finally.
But when you're watching these hearings like this one here, some of the folks that are asking the questions are just kind of like, la-di-da, they're not really, they don't seem to be taking it all that serious, kind of like, well, it's just meeting was over, good grief. But you got the other ones like, what was his name? Wine, I don't have the.
That was, I know exactly who you're talking about. Westrop.
Yeah. He was, I don't want to use the word brutal, but his question.
He was brutal. I would use brutal. He was very brutal.
These guys, they only have a certain amount of time. You could see that on the ticker going down on one of the clocks. It was the one in front of the Director of Navy Intelligence. They only have a limited amount of time, and that's why you hear them say, well, I yield. That means they're whatever time they have left, they're passing on.
Yeah.
So they've got to get those very pointed, very direct questions out of the way. And he was asking the questions that we wanted to hear.
He sure did.
The right questions.
Yeah. I think that he really asked the questions we wanted to hear, and so did Gallagher. Gallagher is the one who addressed the, if there was anything before ATIP. I mean, he may as well had said, have you ever heard of a project called Majestic 12? By bringing up that little key bit and then following up with the whole Wilson document thing at the end, he may as well said it. But he didn't. And, again, Dave, maybe it was compartmentalized for those of us who know what that means.
Yeah.
But I don't know, guys. I was excited more probably after tuning into it and watching what I'd seen. I knew a lot of people were going to be disappointed. They're going to think, oh, well, they didn't say anything or they said the same thing. They really didn't, though. There was a lot of new stuff here. And like you guys both said, there were some really tough questions asked. The question about the Maelstrom incident and the responses to it, to me, was absolutely priceless. So we got a lot of answers, even though they didn't say much, but we still got a lot of answers. We got a lot of head turning. We got some eyes moving back and forth. If you know what to look at, the true answers to some of that stuff. And of course, I think someone asked today, what would it take for us to actually get some, real disclosure on this? It would probably take someone breaking their security oath, which we don't condone anyone doing. That is something that, there's better ways to find this stuff than breaking security oaths. But honestly, I think that's what you would be looking at. You'd be looking at like one of those Snowden type situations where someone broke their security oath and, released what they knew and had to go into hiding.
Yeah.
So until something like that happens, or Dave's Independence Day landing, I think that this is it was a pretty good day for ufology, guys, and I'm really happy that we got to sit down in real time on the same day and discuss this and get this out to our people.
I agree.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Mr. Joseph, why don't you take us out and tell everyone how to find us out there in internet land?
Well, guys, thanks for joining us on this wind down from today's monumental release, essentially, the public acknowledgement and the public hearings that they were having for the UAP phenomena. If you want to keep up with everything we do, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button and then smack that notification bell as fast and hard as you can. We want to hear it ring, so that way you hear it ring every time we produce new content. If you haven't heard of Wild and Weird Radio, go check it out. You can find us anywhere podcasts are found, or go to wildandweirdwv.com. Click the podcast link. You're going to find over 100 episodes that you can sit and go through to your heart's content. We've also got a shop that you can go check out on the same website. If you want to find us over on any other social media platform, you can find Ron at Lanham Ron on Instagram or Facebook. It's Ron Lanham. I am Skinwalker Sculpts on Instagram, or Joe Perdue over on Facebook. Dave is anonymous, and but
not that anonymous.
Yeah, Dave's not that anonymous. But yeah, guys, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for tuning in with us. We really appreciate you guys for sticking in there, and hope this helped anybody out. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, comment down below. We'd love to hear it. And stay wild and weird, everybody.